Good evening, this is News.Ph. I'm Pia Hontiveros. Have we been forgotten? This is the question that the people of Aklan, Antique, Capiz, and Iloilo ask. With the world's attention on Tacloban and Diwan, has very little attention been paid to the island of Panay. So we went to all four provinces to see what Super Typhoon Yolanda did. Our first stop was Aklan. When Super Typhoon Yolanda made landfall 6 times 10 days ago, she carved such a wide swath of destruction, hitting at least 44 provinces, giving new meaning to the words or the phrase, "Hell hath no fury." The almost apocalyptic images of Tacloban and Diwan and the rest of Leyte and Samar made the world's media train its cameras and international aid agencies pour their resources there. But as Yolanda passed through Leyte and Samar, she headed in this direction, in the direction of Panay Island, and she was just as merciless towards Capiz and Aklan and the northern portions of Iloilo and Antique, which is why we are here this morning in Calibo, Aklan, where Yolanda peeled off portions of the roof of the Calibo International Airport, cut down homes, many or most of them made of light materials, felled trees, all kinds of trees, down power lines. Power cables are down here in Aklan, and yes, gave new meaning to the phrase uprooted trees. The entire ground on which, I hope you can see it right now, this huge tree stood for decades is now exposed, and Yolanda also flattened gas stations. Yolanda struck Aklan at 1 o'clock in the afternoon of November 8, Friday. I'd like to show you this building that is behind me. It is the ABL Sports Complex, which stands just in front of the Aklan provincial capital. You can see the damage inflicted on it by Yolanda. Now, why should it matter? Because this was an evacuation center for 5,000 people. So the people inside of it, all 5,000 of them, had to evacuate at the height of Yolanda to the nearby Northwestern Visayas colleges, which is to my right and just across the street. That is the Northwestern Visayan colleges. This is a major disaster preparedness concern, as we saw happened in Leyte. We can't have people seeking refuge somewhere like a school or a sports complex or a church only to find themselves in even greater danger. But this, of course, is not the fault of the local government of Aklan, because as we all know, Yolanda was completely off the charts. The figures come out of the NDRRMC and we report them, Amelin. You sometimes think they're just numbers. Well, they're not. This house here in the coastal town of New Washington is just one of 38,000 homes in the entire province of Aklan that was totally damaged. Yes, this house, as most of the others is made of light materials because, as disaster experts tell us, it is the poor who live in homes such as these who are the most vulnerable when a natural hazard turns into a disaster. A little over 47,000 homes in Aklan were partially damaged. Now, most of these homes that were partially or totally damaged are found in coastal towns such as New Washington, where we are, and that's because of sometimes a storm surge that Pag-asa had warned about, or very high waters. We're going to be speaking to a resident of this barangay, Barangay Tambak, here in New Washington. He is Adrian Magno. Adrian, magandang umaga.
Magandang umaga, ma'am.
Okay, Adrian, yung bahay na yan or yung dating kinatatayuan ng bahay mo, yun, ano?
Opo. So bali yung bahay ko, ma'am, dito pa ho banda yan. So bali umurong na ho doon dahil sa lakas ng ng bagyo. So sira ho talaga, ma'am eh.
Okay. Ano nangyari nung kasagsagan ng Yolanda? Nandito ka?
Oh,
Alauna ng hapon nung tumama sa Aklan.
Nag-start po ng alauna po ng hapon. So nung lumakas na po, yung nasira na po yung bahay ko, so naglikas na po kami.
Ano nangyari sa tubig dito? Lampas sa seawall, ano?
Oh, yung tubig po dito, ma'am, lampas po doon yung yung tubig kasi yung alon po lumakas. Yung tong seawall na po to, lampas po yung tubig diyan.
So hanggang ano?
So siguro estimated, ma'am, lampas bahay, ma'am, yung
Lumapas sa daan, di ba?
Oh, doon sa kalsada, ma'am, abot yun doon. Opo.
Okay. Tapos lampas tao o hanggang dito?
Yung mga hanggang dito lang po, ma'am. Kasi yung lakas po ng hangin, yun po yung nagpalakas doon, yung tubig.
There are no tsunami-like images coming out of Panay Island, but Super Typhoon Yolanda was just as merciless to Aklan, Antique, Capiz, and Iloilo, which is why there were many pleas for help for these four provinces and a message or a question to that attached. Governor Miraflores, can you tell us, do Aklanons feel like they have been forgotten?
Well, yes and no, because right after the typhoon, the President himself gave us a call, and I gave him an assessment of what was happening to Aklan and his assurance of help to the province. And 2-3 days after the typhoon hit us, that was a Wednesday, the initial relief goods came from Iloilo City, and initial assessments were done for the province of Aklan. We understand, of course, that this cannot be done easily because of the tremendous damage, no, the havoc that it brought to Leyte and Tacloban, and it's much, much worse there. And we should also count our blessings. While, of course, we were also badly hit. Almost 80% of our houses made of light materials went down. 94,000 families have been affected. But because of the magnitude of the relief operations, we of course understand the slowness, not exactly the slowness, but the assessment, the assistance that has been given us.
When Super Typhoon Yolanda made landfall 6 times 10 days ago, she carved such a wide swath of destruction, hitting at least 44 provinces. The almost apocalyptic images of Tacloban and Giwan and the rest of Leyte and Samar made the world's media train its cameras and international aid agencies pour their resources there. But as Yolanda passed through Leyte and Samar, she headed in this direction, Panay Island, and she was just as merciless towards the northernmost parts of Iloilo and Antique and Capiz and Aklan, leading many of the locals here to ask, have we been forgotten? On the road to Capiz, a crumpled Napocor tower was a sight to behold, and so was this roof lying on the right side of the National Highway in Altavas town. It had been blown off the school building to our left, leaving classrooms that cannot be used at all, notebooks without students, books still damp after 10 days spread out to dry.
Dahil hinihintay muna namin yun, sabi ng kapitan, kanina na para mayroon daw duli na na yung daw may budget na ibibigay bawat barangay na 30,000 para sa mga purpose to work, work for food yata yun. So dito niya to clean up, then yung paputol-putol ng mga kahoy para at least malinis. Sila maglilinis. Sana ma-release na yun eh. Yun yung namin hinihintay namin.
Tulungan niyo ho ang school namin dahil wala kami classroom na magagamit. Tulungan para maayos ang amin. Para lang.
When a natural hazard turned disaster happens, schools become evacuation centers. On election day, schools turn into polling precincts. And on any ordinary day, schools are its pupils' second home. In other words, schools are meant to be safe havens. Rebuilding will take quite a while. Aklan still has no electric power, but electric cooperatives from all over the country responded and began repairing the lines.
Ilang araw niyo na po yung pag-ano po?
3 days lang po kami dito. 3 days pa lang po kami dito. Marami naman po kaming nagagawa.
Without power, any province is crippled, more so when its prime industry is tourism. Boracay usually gets an influx of guests in December, and there's Calibos at the Atihan in January. Pia Hontiveros, Solar News, Aklan. If Aklan was hit hard, Capiz was hit even harder. Nancy, whatever we saw in Aklan, we saw here also in Capiz. Schools that serve as evacuation centers, partially or severely damaged, like the Maninang Elementary School in the town of Sapian, here in Capiz, and houses, rows of houses damaged. There are close to 100,000 of these homes that are completely damaged. These homes, most of them made of light material. 600,000 persons affected, 57 dead and 138 injured. Substantial damage to infrastructure, substantial damage to agriculture. Capiz is, of course, the seafood capital of the Philippines. There is no electricity yet here in Capiz. We are running on generators. Last Monday in a telephone interview I had with Capiz Governor Vic Tanco, he said it is almost as if a nuclear war had come to Capiz. He joins us here live just outside the Governor's Hall here at the provincial capital of Capiz. Mayong gabi, Governor Tanco. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Pia. Good evening to your televiewers.
Governor, let's begin with this. There are many messages on social media from Aklanons, mga Capiceños, Antiqueños, and Ilonggos asking, have we been forgotten? Has Capiz been forgotten?
Yes, I think that's the impression because there's no news actually coming out in media about Capiz when actually we are about just the same as Tacloban when the typhoon hit us.
We are in the Governor's Hall on the third floor of the Capiz provincial capital. And if it looks like a busy hall, that's because it is. This is where government, NGO, and international aid agencies responding to Super Typhoon Yolanda's aftermath here on Panay Island are headquartered. Capiz, Aklan, and the northern portions of Antique and Iloilo were not spared as Yolanda carved out a path of destruction. Here in Capiz, estimated cost of damage to infrastructure is over 3.5 billion pesos. Damage to infrastructure close to 700 million. Almost 700,000 persons affected or displaced. 57 people are dead. 133 people are injured. Those are not just numbers, those are people affected by Super Typhoon Yolanda. There's been a global effort to come together, as we see in this hall, for the victims of Yolanda, specifically here on Panay Island, and that is evident, as I said, here in the Governor's Hall. Renee Nayenhouse of the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is joining us to tell us more about this. Good evening, Renee. Thank you for joining us. Tell us what this setup is all about.
Good evening. This is a setup where we're working with the provincial authorities, with international actors such as the United Nations, international NGOs, and we also have foreign military assets here from the government of Canada, and we're working together hand in hand trying to get all the relief goods as soon as possible to the affected people.
This is what Super Typhoon Yolanda's winds did here in the Rojas City Public Plaza, just right across City Hall that is behind me. The typhoon toppled the sturdiest trees like this one, uprooting them in their entirety. And when I say entirety, I mean entirety. 2 to 3 meters wide of roots. That's the diameter, that's how big the roots are of this tree that was toppled. But there are 12 other such trees that are lying here on their sides in the public plaza of Rojas City, here in the center. Rojas City, of course, the capital of the province of Capiz. I'm sure you can see that some of the branches had already been cut because authorities want to make sure that there is space here so that people can still walk around. They have been cut. It's been 11 days after all since Yolanda struck. Of course, no one was here in the public plaza when Yolanda paid a visit, so there were no casualties, no injuries in this particular spot. But of course, in Capiz, there are several dead, more than 100 injured, and one person missing, and many families affected here in the province of Capiz, as well as the entire island of Panay. Capiz, Antique, Aklan, and Iloilo. Relief is ongoing. A truck had just passed by here in the public plaza filled with relief aid for the town of Panitan. That's about 20 to 30 minutes from Rojas City. But we just wanted to illustrate for you what a super typhoon with winds that were completely off the charts can do, which is why everyone, all the disaster, all the climate change experts are saying Yolanda was a very clear and loud warning about global warming, and a message not only that we haven't seen the last of these super typhoons, but that a super typhoon, much like an earthquake, is a natural hazard, and that it only turns into a disaster when we don't prepare for it.
Never ever underestimate the power of a natural hazard, or it's going to get back at you with ferocity such as what Super Typhoon Yolanda put on display. The biggest and oldest trees in this public plaza in Rojas City just right across City Hall, were no match for Yolanda. A very clear and loud warning about global warming, a message that we haven't seen the last of these super typhoons that go completely off the charts. This is Yuki's Grill and Restaurant in Barangay Baybay, Rojas City.
I want to take you inside what once was Yuki. This path, which we are walking on, leads to the main restaurant, or what remains of it.
The roof flew off to one side. Chairs and tables were saved though.
Pinapamadali niya ma'am pag-aayos para makahabol sa December ang restaurant para makabawi-bawi sa pinsala ng bagyo.
But Jeffrey is also a victim.
Yung bahay namin ma'am, yung bubong lumipad tapos namulot lang kami ng bubong pamalis sa ma'am sa nagibang bubong.
This is what rebuilding in the aftermath of a disaster is like. It will take time, a lot of money, and fortitude and commitment. Electric cooperatives from other provinces have come to Capice's rescue, restoring power lines, but the power supply itself is another matter. This is Santa Monica Church in the town of Panay, just outside Ross City, home to the biggest bell in Southeast Asia. The church sustained some damage, but homes some 5 kilometers away are destroyed. Affected communities who live along the coastline are coping and surviving with the relief and aid that comes. In the next town, Pontevedra, the coping and surviving goes on. This gas station in Barangay Tabuk was severely damaged, but can still deliver gas and diesel needs. Without those, vehicles won't run, and neither will generators set. The needs are great here in Capiz. We can only collectively wish they will be met.
Tuesday evening, we traveled to the northwestern tip of Iloilo, where Yolanda struck land for a 5th time on November 8. Nancy, this is the coastal town of Carles in Iloilo, the northeasternmost tip of the island of Panay. If you look at a map of Panay and imagine the island as a square, Carles is on the upper right-hand side. The town of Concepcion, which is 2 towns south of Carles, about an hour from here, was where Yolanda made its 5th landfall, and then it moved on to Capiz, and then Aklan, and then northern Antique. But Carles is the town with the most number of casualties in the entire province of Iloilo. 13 people died here. The town's municipal hall heavily damaged. So was another school along the way, which we saw the roofs of most of its buildings blown off. We're standing by the sea. The sea is right behind me, and we are in Barangay Punta Carles. We are going to speak to Hans Angon. This is Hans's house right behind us. Good evening po. Sir, can you tell us, ano po nangyari nung dumating ang Yolanda?
Nang mga alas 12 ng aga, nagumpisa na ng ang Yolanda, nagumpisa na umampas hanggang siguro more or less mga alas 3 ng hapon. Talagang napakalakas ng bagyo. Sa lahat na bagyo na anuhan ko, ito na sigurong Yolanda kasi yung pating mga traple namin, mga batong malalaki, inaano ng hangin at saka
Itong mga bato na to.
pader at saka
Na yan, ano? Concrete.
mga bato na mga malalaki.
Okay.
Inihagis ng hangin eh.
Ano nangyari po sa bahay, yung bubong? Yung bubong.
Sa bubong namin, ma'am, ubos lahat, lipad lahat ang mga yero kasi nawasak yung pader sa itaas dahil sa foundation na mahina. Yun, pinasok ng hangin. Saka na wipe out lahat ang bubong namin.
Mapapansin po natin yung wall, yung dingding ng bahay medyo it's leaning inwards, ano?
Yes,
ano
ma'am.
yun? Dahil sa
Kasi
tubig at hangin?
Sa lakas ng tubig na bumabangga, ma'am, at pumapasok na hangin na malakas rin. Napakalakas talaga. Pati foundation niya na parang nasira eh. Nasira lahat ng mga foundation niya eh. Inano ng tubig at malakas na hangin.
Hindi po kayo nag-evacuate?
Hindi kami, ma'am, nag-evacuate kasi hindi kami naniniwala na sa ganito na ng plastada ng bahay namin. At saka hindi ako naniniwala na ganun kalakas ang bagyo. Kaya lang, malakas talaga, ma'am eh.
May relief na dumarating?
Mayroon dito, ma'am, na dumadaan lang sa amin, pero kayo, ma'am, the first time na nakapunta dito. Sa iba, mayroong man nakapunta doon. Pero dito sa amin wala.
Ano na relief?
Yes ma'am, mga sari-sari ma'am. Kasi doon ang bahay ni Kapitan ma'am, doon sila pumupunta eh.
Okay, okay. Okay. Sabi niyo sa tanda ninyo ngayon lang kayo naka-experience ng ganitong bagyo, no?
Yes ma'am, ito na ang pinakalakas na bagyo. Anuhan ko, pati nung yung mga undang, mga ano yun na wala
Typhoon
dito.
Frank,
Malakas ito yan. Ito ma'am talaga ma'am. Ito malakas talaga ito ma'am.
paano kung sabihin ko sa inyo na in the future, magkakaroon pa ng isa pang Yolanda o mas malakas pa sa Yolanda?
Wow, siguro ma'am, ano na lang natin ma'am sa Diyos na wala ng bagyong malakas pa kay Yolanda ma'am na darating sa atin. Ano na lang natin sa Diyos na wala nang darating na bagyo na ganito kalakas at ano.
Maraming salamat. Hans Angon, a resident here in Barangay Punta Carles, in the town of Carles here in northern Iloilo. Yolanda did this to Panay Island. This is a News.Ph special, Panay Island, Have We Been Forgotten? We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is a News.Ph special, Panay Island, You Are Not Forgotten. Our very last stop was Antique.
I'm in the town of Sebaste here in Antique. Antique is, of course, one of the 4 provinces here in the island of Panay. Antique, Aklan, Capiz, and Iloilo. Sebaste is a coastal town in the northern part of the province. It is among the worst hit. You see Yolanda's impact on the poblacion. It's very obvious here. The municipal hall is damaged. Parts of the roof have been peeled off and it's dripping and wet inside. There is no power, of course, in this town. The police station to the left of the municipal building is in such a sad state also. Parts of its roof also blown off. It's also dripping inside and very wet. I looked for the chief of police, police inspector Winnie Andico, but he's not here. But that's because he had to go to Iloilo, where the PNP's regional headquarters is, so that he could get a generator set, which is a good thing. It is the PNP's way of supporting their units in the field. The multipurpose hall, which is a little in front of the police station, also badly damaged. Parts of the roof peeled off, and it's also dripping inside. The entire frontage of the municipal hall full of broken branches of the trees that have fallen off because of Typhoon Yolanda. Just across the street, there is a school. The roof of the stage and the roof of some of the buildings also blown off. That means no classes, of course. Because the schools have no roofs, they can't have class. No? So it all depends on the weather. When it rains, no classes. When the sun is out, there are classes. The problem is this whole morning at certain times, the wind would be very strong. It would be raining, then the sun comes out, then the wind blows again, and then it starts raining again. I was speaking to Mayor Jose Christopher Barona, the mayor of Sebaste, and he was so thankful that media had come here to Sebaste to what he said to document the damage, because he said it would prove their reports to the national government that indeed the municipality had sustained quite an amount of damage. It's interesting also how carefully the mayor of this town is treating the distribution of relief goods. He said that after an initial round of collating reports about houses that are either partially or completely damaged, he formed an audit team to check and recheck if the reports are true. He also says that there will be support coming from the provincial government for construction materials that they will be distributing.
ng mga na totally damaged at hindi totally damaged, kasi yung pinasubmit namin, ASAP yun, after ng typhoon. Yung mga barangay, punong barangay, there barangay Kagawad, then their Porok leaders, BHW. Pinabalidate namin sa kanila, nagbigay sila ng lista, parang super typhoon talaga. At kung marinig mo lang sa news, parang mahirap talaga ang mangyari dito. Talagang totoo pala. Kasi minsan, noon yan naranasan na namin yung tao kasi, hindi yan makakuha kasi yung mga matatanda sabi, wala yan, walang signs, talagang walang signs itong typhoon na super typhoon na Yolanda ito eh. Walang signs. Kaya Based sa monitoring namin, talagang mag-prepare kami. Kasi gusto namin maiwasan talaga yung casualty. Kaya zero casualty kami dito.
And also, we also came from Barangay Itio. That's one of the barangays here in Sebaste. The covered court, heavily damaged, parts of the roof, the sheets of galvanized iron had been peeled off, and some of the sheets of galvanized iron were just hanging on precariously. At one point, some of the sheets just flew off when we were there. You know, a lot of people had been saying in social media, and even here when we were here, many people in all the 4 provinces saying the same thing, have we been forgotten? But of course, you know, the national government has always said that they have not forgotten Panay.
When we are unprepared, a natural hazard turns into a disaster. But disasters happen to people, and the suffering they endure is beyond imagination. Going to an evacuation center here in Capiz and speaking to those who've sought refuge there is almost like intruding into their lives. But being Filipino, the evacuees welcome our questions and our camera. They want their story told. This man says he and his family have no more home to return to. But he counts his blessings. There are relief goods every day, he says.
Mga isang gantang na bigas at saka sardinas, noodles.
And that is what his family has for dinner, by the light of 2 candles. Children are the most vulnerable during, but more so in the aftermath of a disaster. They are exposed to the elements. No crib for a bed, but the concrete floor and their mat is better than nothing at all. Filipinos have a copyright on hospitality, so as we pass by the stable, a woman calls out to us. Let's eat, ma'am, she says, inviting us to partake of their meager portions. And she says it with the warmest of Filipino smiles. When Sally Daria evacuated before the storm, she took her worldly possessions and her life savings with her, the contents of her sari-sari store. Sally says the mayor of the town, Steve Contreras, sent an ambulance to evacuate them to this shelter. Sally is also a barangay health worker. In milder disasters, she would have been a first responder. But as Yolanda's wrath has shown, everyone was a victim. Joel Bernades survived Yolanda, but he is suffering from hydrocephalus. When he was born, doctors gave him 3 days to live.
Sabi ko, kung yan naman ang sa bata ko, ayaw ko na lang yun. Kaya ko lang ipagpadala.
He turns 27 on Monday. It isn't clear yet if he and his family will be home in time for his birthday, or at least in time for Christmas. She cradles Joel in her arms. She speaks to him. He mumbles an answer, but she understands exactly what he's trying to say. The utter helplessness of someone who has become a victim twice over makes you wish for a cure, a way out, because he has suffered more than enough. And it is the indescribable suffering of those who survived a storm but are barely surviving its aftermath that gets you thinking. What does it mean to be more human, to be humanitarian, post-disaster? The answer stares us in the face, right there in an evacuation center. It means we should look out for one another. It means to build back better and to strive for nothing less. All of us together, including journalists whose role is to shine the light on that which the world should know about. Yolanda, after all, is not just a story. When we stepped out of the evacuation center and climbed into our vehicle, my team and I rode in silence for the first 10 minutes. The suffering should make us all make a commitment. We should build back better. That should be the non-negotiable. Thank you for watching. I'm Pia Hontiveros. This is News.Ph. See you again next Wednesday. Good night.